What? What is this?
So slow to catch on.
Look at those monsters!
Relax, beautiful.
Hello everybody and welcome back to another field report in Typewriter Sessions. I'm Brett and as always I'm joined by James.
What up, dog?
And we are doing a field report on everything Resident Evil Veronica.
Woo, baby!
Just as we promised, so after finishing our Code Veronica series, we did say that we wasn't going to talk about Veronica in that it does have a field report of its own, and yep, we've finally got it. After years of rumours, requests and speculation, Capcom has officially announced Resident Evil Veronica. That being very key.
Big excitement. It was really tough not just talking about this like the entire way through the last episode.
Yeah. Well, because there's so many things that you want to compare it to, and everything that we discussed, because we was already doing that in the first episode of that series.
Yeah.
Was if they do a remake, will they change this? If they do a remake, will they do that? But now we know that they are doing a remake, and everything we was talking about was like, oh, I wonder if they'll do this. I wonder if they'll do that.
Yeah.
So the conversation continues, doesn't it? But we are going to go through absolutely everything Capcom has officially shown and said so far. So no more rumours, no more leaks. It's just the facts. We will, of course, talk about some of our theories and some of the theories going around. But first, let's just get straight into it, and let's just start with the announcement. So it was announced back at Summer Game Fest.
It was indeed.
Which, if I've got this right, 5th of June. Was it really that long ago when they announced it?
A month ago.
My God, that time has flown by, man.
Yeah.
That is insane.
I know.
So it was the opening announcement of Jeff Keighley's showcase, and it was an obvious choice, really, for them to open with Veronica, wasn't it?
Yeah, you usually Summer Game Fest, or what used to be E3, they need a big banger to get the show off, and it was, as we've spoken about multiple times on the pod over the months, it's everyone's been expecting this. It was sort of not even like a poorly kept secret in the industry, because it was only ever really like speculation, but it was like informed speculation. It was, this is the most logical next port of call for Capcom in their like remake journey. Yeah,
exactly. I mean, when you think about some of the things that have been going around, everyone's been trying to guess what the next remake would be.
Yeah.
But I think everyone was believing that, the most obvious one would indeed be Veronica. But, so, I mean, we've had 0, we've even had 5.
Yeah.
And I'm just thinking, it was never going to be either of those, I don't think.
No, well, and again, I'm not sure whether this is any like official party line, or if this is just one of these sort of nebulous leaks. But I did read somewhere the other day that apparently someone internally at Capcom has said that they're not actively pursuing remaking 5 or 6.
Yeah, I saw
that. Like, they're not even on the docket at the moment.
Yeah. Although I don't have the quote or anything about that, because it's strictly about Veronica. I haven't got anything written down as something just to touch on. But I think what I had read was when someone asked about what their thoughts or intentions were for the remake of 5 and 6, I believe that this particular person in the production field or of some kind within the Resident Evil projects, their line was no idea. Literally, it was no idea. And I think that just either that's them playing,
I mean, you
never really know, do you?
You do always have to take these statements with a grain of salt, because it's like, when it comes to like big secretive plans, it's like, there's NDAs in effect, and there's, trying to maintain suspense and surprise, especially for projects that are potentially years, if not a decade away. Yeah, you don't want to be giving away the game too early.
But that being said, I do genuinely believe that 5 and 6 is not an important project for them to pursue when there's much older titles for them to be revisiting. I really do believe that if we get anything after Veronica, it is either going to be a remake of 0 or indeed the original Resident Evil.
Yeah, for no other reason than I'm just sort of spitballing. I know we've already gone wildly off topic, but like I sort of had this harebrained thought at some point where I was like, is there a world in which Capcom could do sort of what Remedy are doing at the moment with Max Payne, in that they're remaking Max Payne 1 and 2 as a single game? And it did make me wonder, like, is there a universe in which they could kind of, especially because, Resident Evil already has one of the most high profile, most well beloved remakes of all time, to avoid completely just like treading that same ground again. Is there a way that they sort of figure out how they can tell 0 and 1 as a single story?
Well, I think it needs to
cut down all of the sort of less important parts of 0.
Well, yeah, because 0 is so heavily like, what's the word? It's so. How can I describe it? 0 has so much in it that there's no way that Rebecca Chambers would just be this sort of like, she seems to like so helpless for a start. Yeah. She's so helpless. She seems to be like completely unawares or like, so surprised by all of these monsters. You find her, she's crawling away from a hunter in one room and, you have to help her as Chris. And it's just like, you've literally just taken on a prototype tyrant a couple of times. You've taken on James Marcus in this massive ultra leech form thing a few times. It's just, 0 doesn't make sense after you've played the first.
No.
And I think, because then you start looking back, well, yeah, but now Resident Evil, don't make any sense. This wouldn't have happened and Rebecca won't be this way. So I think really, you're probably right. They either have to remake 0 in such a way that the events that take place in 0 will be referenced more in a proper remake of the original Resident Evil, so that Rebecca won't be as fucking stupid and helpless. She would be a bit like, you'll never believe what's happened to me today type thing. So, yeah, either that or, in an ideal situation, turn the whole Arklay Mountains incident with the mansion and everything into one massive saga, and that would be cool. I
mean, the fact that those two games were sort of bundled together as a release called the Resident Evil Origins Collection.
Yeah,
I could envision a world where we just get one game called Resident Evil Origins, and it is the entire Arklay incident from both Alpha and Bravo teams.
I mean, it often gets referred to as the Mansion Incident.
Yeah,
it could be called Resident Evil: The Mansion Incident.
Yeah,
or Resident Evil Stars. Anything really. Yeah. But yeah, I agree. And although we have gone on a little bit of a tangent, but we're just talking about like
we got off the rails real fast.
Yeah, we didn't even get past the first bit, really, did we?
The rails, Resident Evil 0 reference.
Hey-oh!
There you go.
And the rail shooters for Umbra. No, I'm reaching.
Anyway,
anywho,
so yes, back on track. So
so they've gone for Veronica.
Yeah. So Summer Game Fest opening announcement on the big stage.
Mm-hmm. I think it shows how important it is for them to have picked Veronica. It's also obvious. We've just said all this, it was very obvious for them to go with Veronica, but I think it sort of shows you how important it is for the timeline of Resident Evil that they've gone for Veronica. I don't think they could wait to do a remake of 4. I don't think they should have done 4 first. I think they should have done Veronica.
Yeah.
But I don't think they could wait to do 4 because everyone fucking loves 4.
Yeah.
And I think that's why we got a 4 remake. Also, probably because it fits into the whole thing of Requiem, with Leon and the stealth system, the knife. Then we got the hatchet, which is like the evolution of that, the parrying and all the rest of it. But I really do think we should have had Veronica first, just based on the narrative. But the story narrative and the chronological series of events. But it's nice that we finally get a continuation of Claire's story. It feels right.
Yeah, very much so. It's, it's been the best part of a decade since RE2 Remake came out now, and we've seen nothing of Ms. Redfield since then. So
nope, exactly. So in terms of the release window, I think they said February 2027, didn't they?
I don't think this. I think they just said 2027. I don't believe.
Well, I know
there's been a specific. I think most people just sort of assumed February because that has been, for a lot of the remakes, like a February release. And obviously we got Requiem in February this year. I don't think it would be unreasonable to think it would be that same sort of launch window. But it depends how long. It depends how long it's. I mean, you have to assume it's been in development for quite some time.
Yeah, it does just simply say 2027.
Yeah.
And that was the most recent update as well. So, just 2027. However, what is interesting, though, it does say that the Nintendo Switch 2 version will release at the same time, which is interesting.
Yeah.
Normally when it's been sort of downgraded, so to speak, you don't always get a release straight away, but apparently the Switch 2 will release at the same time.
I guess that probably speaks as much to the fact that the Switch 2 developers seem to be taking it a little more seriously than they did with the original Switch. It's not.
Yeah.
It's less of an afterthought and seems more like even though, everyone knows that, like, technically it's still probably like a generation behind.
Oh, yeah.
Technology-wise, but it's still like, it's closer to being, on a par with what we've got now than the original Switch was. So it makes sense that they're trying to keep that console in the loop as well.
One of the biggest things that we learned was that it is no longer going to be called Code Veronica, and it's simply Veronica.
It is indeed.
So the producer Yoshiaki Hirabayashi, I believe is his name. I don't know. For our development team, we consider the original Code Veronica to be just as important and relevant as any other mainline entry. He continued, it's usually one word that is really iconic or connected to the concepts of the game. We settled on Resident Evil Veronica. End quote.
Yeah.
So, I think it makes sense. I mean, I think we spoke about this. I can't remember if it was actually in the recording or after the fact.
Yeah.
That I think it might have been after we finished our last episode. We were talking about the whole Code Veronica.
Yes.
And how very sort of 2000s it was to sort of say, Code Veronica.
Yeah. It smacks of leather trench coats and cyber goth, doesn't it?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. It fully makes sense. I know. I think we've chatted about this as well. I've seen the sort of mind-warped conspiracy theorists that think that, because it's REV, that means that they're trying to erase Resident Evil 5 from the timeline, and this is...
Yeah.
That, for starters, that doesn't even make sense, because Code Veronica chronologically takes place before Resident Evil 4. So... I don't know what to tell you, but yeah, it's been sort of heavily inferred that they're just trying to like, it's a more streamlined name. It fits in with the naming convention of Resident Evil Biohazard, Resident Evil Village, Resident Evil Requiem, Resident Evil Veronica. It's just a neat, streamlined name.
And you know what, I think because it's never really made clear about who or what Veronica is within the game Code Veronica, unless you read extensively the files and everything that Veronica Ashford and everything else, because Veronica Ashford is not in the game. You know, it's Alexia, Alfred, Alexander, all these Ashfords, and the main villains of the game, you know, if we take into account Code Veronica X, the main villains of the game are Alfred, Alexia, and Wesker.
Yeah.
Veronica's never really mentioned. The only time you ever really hear anyone speak the words Veronica, I think, is Wesker in Code Veronica X, where he says that there's still... Oh no, it's when he confronts Alexia that she has the sample of the T Veronica virus within her cells.
Yeah.
And he wants it. Otherwise, I don't think it's actually explicitly mentioned how important Veronica is to the game and to these characters and why Veronica matters so much to like the legacy of the Ashfords and all the rest of it. So I think simply calling it Veronica emphasizes the importance of Veronica, and hopefully they'll actually narratively
flesh that out.
That, you know, the whole point of Alexia and Alfred being made was that they are genetically grown creations from Veronica's DNA. So I think all of that hopefully will be a little more fleshed out, and we'll actually, that's why it'll just be called Veronica rather than Code Veronica. So I think it's 100% necessary that they do it, and hopefully we'll get some sort of like fleshed out. Hirabayashi explained that Capcom wanted to fill the gaps in the overarching story and give Veronica the same level of care as the Resident Evil 2 remake. So, you know, we talked about why make Veronica instead of a 5 remake or whatever, but I do think, you know, I've said it before, and I said it when I played it on my channel and all the rest of it, is that, and some people said it was a naff game, you know, like some of the comments I got on my channel were quite negative about Code Veronica, saying like it was one of the worst Resident Evil games and all the rest of it, but I really don't agree. I think it's a great game. I really enjoy it. It's fucking solid. But in terms of what it does to, we talked about this in our main series that we've literally just finished, is you know, just how important it is to the overarching world of Resident Evil. And how it continues to drive the story forward. It's you know, it's specifically a very necessary chapter in the Wesker story that I would be quite surprised if they didn't lean into that even more in this remake. I feel like we're going to see Wesker a lot more in the game than he was in the original. I certainly hope so.
Yeah.
Because even in these remakes, we've not seen a massive amount of him. You know, he pops up here and there and everything, but for this new generation of Resident Evil gamers, I would love them to see the importance of Wesker to the franchise and why he will always be the villain of the series, even after his demise. I think ultimately, if they went for a remake of RE5, you'd face off against Wesker with no real like, oh my god, it's Wesker, because there's been no build up as to who he is or anything on his importance.
For, you know, modern Resident Evil fans, of which there will be a sizable amount of people I would assume, that have only played the last, I say like the modern generation games, the sort of Resident Evil 7 onwards, because that a lot of people just don't look backwards. Do they want to play games that are newer and glossy and high fidelity and have a modern sort of slick gameplay? That's I can't gatekeep that. I think that's fine. You play what feels good to play. I bounce off older games sometimes. I did it myself yesterday. Went back to tried playing the original, well, or at least the HD remaster of Devil May Cry yesterday. And I was just didn't get on with it at all.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's a shame.
It is a shame. I love
because I've been tempted to go back to that.
I love the aesthetic of Devil May Cry. I like the idea of it, but just in practice, I just didn't enjoy there's no free camera movement. The controls are quite sort of clunky and unintuitive. I just bounced off it. And there's a lot of people that feel that way about the older Resident Evil games, and not even just the fixed camera angle ones. Even when I played Resident Evil 5 recently, and it's like, even though it's a more modern game than the old Resident Evils, it's still noticeably outdated control systems. And
you turn like a boat, don't you? You don't just sort of turn nice and sharply or anything. You do this real long arc. It's not a particularly easy game to play.
No, not at all. And so because there's there'll be a sizable amount of people that have only played the sort of last couple of generations of Resident Evil games, they've got, aside from a blink and you miss it cameo at the end of Resident Evil 4 remake, because I would imagine the percentage of people that played Resident Evil 4 versus that also played Separate Ways is probably quite small. So that's literally the only appearance he's made. He's not in 2, he's not in 3, he's not in Village, or I mean we can argue whether he is in Requiem.
Well, yeah, this is it,
his
isn't
presence is felt through Xeno. But
yes.
So I think, considering how important he is to the overall Resi mythos, I think it is important that that he has a really, really strong presence in Veronica, and not just fleeting moments here and there. I'd at the very least, I would imagine that you're going to get a big Wesker boss fight. I don't think the big fight with Chris is going to be a cutscene this time. I think it'll be similar to the Krauser fight in 4 or the Honk fight in Requiem. I think you're going to get a big interactive, brutal fight sequence.
Interesting. Yeah, that would be interesting. I also think it's interesting that we've been reintroduced to Wesker in this sort of reverse way, that we've been drip fed him in the remake world. You get him a little bit at the end of 4. You get more of him in Separate Ways, which again, not a lot of people might not have played that.
They're Thanos in him.
Yeah, that's it. The
little teasers here and there,
little eggs just being laid every now and then we get a little bit of him in Requiem through Zeno, whatever he's called, and then now we're going to get him in Veronica, and he's going to be like, oh, so this is who this guy is that we keep getting sort of shown and introduced to, and then I wonder who he is who before this then, and then we'll eventually get some sort of remake of Zero and the original, and he obviously plays a part in Zero, so we're just going to keep getting retrospectively introduced to him. So yeah, very interesting anyway, but I think it was the right decision to make Veronica over 5, definitely. The trailer was an interesting one that we got. The trailer, I think anyone who's listening to this has seen it, but it's a great trailer. I think that whole thing from the first person perspective was very much a deliberate something to get everyone talking. But they have turned around now and said that the game will be strictly third person. So I would say that there's a very likelihood that first bit that you get is either going to be a cutscene or we will be playing it in third person.
Yeah, yeah. Or unless, I mean, there's a possibility you might be looking at something similar to the start of the Resident Evil 3 remake. Because there is the sort of short sequence at the beginning of that when you're in Jill's apartment where you do play it in first person before
it starts,
before sort of Nemesis smashes through the wall and it becomes third person.
Because Hirobayashi has even said that the trailer was designed to surprise people and it may not even represent the game's opening sequence.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see what we eventually do end up with.
Yeah. That opening... The sort of opening sequence of that trailer, I can see sort of retroactively now, it was very much a misdirect in terms of like there are hints and there's the little gag about looks like a boulder rolled through here, but you know I think it was very deliberate in having it in first person. It's not immediately clear who the character is that whose eyes you're seeing through, and I think it was meant for that, to create this sort of, because I watched a few sort of like reaction videos to it on some of the like gaming channels that I follow on TikTok and stuff, and they were watching that like watching it live, so no idea, blind react, and until that like moment where the door bursts open and then you see the knife go to the throat, and people were genuinely shocked that like, oh my god, it's Claire, oh my god, it's Veronica, it's like it doesn't give it away unless you really know what you're watching,
yeah,
or like really dialed into those little sort of sly references. I know I saw someone point out that like that opening shot when there's like the shot of Paris. And you see that, like, the card coming down the street or whatever. There is a very, really far in the distance. There is a building in the back with an Umbrella logo on it, but it's like so far in the distance that you have to be like frame by frame, like inspecting it to have seen it.
Yeah, and I think even the fact that it's in Paris. And we know that Claire goes to infiltrate, in the original Code Veronica, she goes to Paris to infiltrate an Umbrella site in Paris.
Yeah.
There's nothing about that trailer that suggests that, oh, this could be Resident Evil because we're in Paris. It's just looks like another game. And I think it's quite interesting that they've potentially changed the opening for Claire. Because as we know in the Code Veronica, our introduction to Claire in that game is her running down a glass hallway with a helicopter shooting at her, very John Woo style, and it's very overly dramatic. Where this is just a lot more, like it's a lot more. I don't know. Anyway, it's almost like more sinister, isn't it? Because she comes in, she's looking around, no sign of Chris, he's gone. And then, who we can only assume to be Hunk, appears, captures Claire, and then that's it. And I think that's a far better capturing of of Claire, than what we originally had. I think that's far better. It's more sinister. It's almost like, well, Umbrella have been watching her, keeping an eye on her, keeping tabs on her. They finally have their moment. They've been scouting the place out, knowing that probably someone would come looking for Chris, and then boom, they capture her. I think that's a far better opening if that's the opening we do indeed get.
Again, if
we do indeed get, one thing I do have to just say though about that opening sequence, or that trailer really that we've had, is the old lady. Because I think by far that is probably the worst French accent I've ever heard in my life.
Yeah, I won't disagree with that. That is
absolutely horrific. Actually took me out of it a few times. Fucking awful. I was really wanting to be engrossed in the whole thing because I already knew it was the Veronica trailer because I saw it on YouTube, and so I knew what I was watching.
Yeah.
And all the time she's there going, would you like some biscuits? And I'm just like, what the fuck is happening? Shut the fuck up. Actually get a real French person who has an accent. Can't be that hard. There's probably going to be hundreds of fucking actors waiting for a part. You know, and instead we get this person who's not even old, probably, to do an accent of an old French lady who's not even French or old. I'm just like, dude.
Yeah, we can but hope that, you know, that was just some, like, temp voice acting to get the trailer out there.
I really hope so, because, seriously, that's probably the Capcom secretary, because that's fucking terrible. So, yeah, I overall, though, I think the atmosphere and everything about it was absolutely fantastic. You know, I thought everything about it was just, because then you get those sort of quick flashes of one thing to another once that part where Hunk comes in, captures Claire.
Yeah,
the flashes that sort of come up after that.
We see a few of the locations. We see, Rockfort Island,
the castles,
like the entrance. We see man in a red velvet jacket stood on some stairs, which, you know, I think we can assume who that is.
Wesker! So, but yeah, I think it's great. I'm really excited to see, you know, more that they release and they drip feed to us, undoubtedly. But yeah, I think all those little things that we see in the trailer, there's plenty to get excited for. And who knows when they'll give us some more to get excited and to wet our whistles with.
Yeah, I mean, if I were a betting man, I'd say we'll probably get something at the Game Awards in December.
Yeah, fingers crossed.
Gameplay would be nice.
Well, yeah, I mean, we're still within 30th anniversary year of Resident Evil. It only makes sense that they'd give us some more.
Yep.
I'm really hoping that they do. I'd really like to see some more by the end of the year, and at least some gameplay would be nice.
Yeah, I think we will.
Speaking on gameplay, so the things that we do know, which we've already covered the vast majority of it, is that it will be running in the RE engine, which is, you know, that's a given. But third person with modern controls, no fixed cameras, no tank controls, and I think, you know, the fact that we can expect probably everything that we've had in subsequent Resident Evils that they've introduced every time.
Yeah.
You know, with Resident Evil 2, then 3, and then 4, and now Requiem.
Yeah.
I think probably everything that we've had up until that point is going to feature in some way, shape, or form.
There's not been, aside from like the odd little occasional new mechanic, like, you know, we got like the blood collecting in Requiem and things like that. It's all of the RE Engine games have been versions of the same thing, haven't they? It's like, we might get a slightly different. Will we get the classic inventory system or the briefcase system? Probably the classic one, I would imagine, because that's more consistent with.
But it does make me wonder as well, though, that based on what you've just said there, that feels more like it fits that more. With that being the case as well, then, do you think we'll have the knife/hatchet and the parrying system?
Maybe they'll do what they did in Requiem, and you'll get that for Chris, but not Claire.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, I could see that.
Maybe two styles of like game, not as polarizing as Grace and Leon, but maybe two different versions.
Yeah,
of,
just something that actually differentiates that you're playing as two separate characters
with two different approaches to combat.
And two different sets of attributes. Yeah.
I think you're right. I think Claire's might maybe focus a little more on stealth. Chris's will be a bit more action focused.
Yeah.
I think we'll probably get the crouching system with the stealth again, but who knows?
Yeah.
Who knows? The enemies in this will be different because we'll be going back to zombies rather than sort of parasited Ganados or the intelligent zombies we had in Requiem.
Yeah.
I think, we're going back to the undead T-virus zombies, so maybe stealth isn't possible on, maybe we'll go backwards slightly. Who knows? Who knows?
Yeah, we are sort of venturing into like theory and speculation now.
Well, that's all we've got, because we haven't got a lot to work with.
Yeah, no, exactly. So I know one of the, I don't know if this is in your notes, but I know one thing that I've seen sort of rumoured for quite a while, even before the official announcement, really, but that seems to sort of be persisting, is that one sort of big change is going to be that Rockfort Island is a kind of semi-open map.
Right,
And that Claire has access to a motorbike, and you can it's going to be a much bigger space than the original, and that there is a level or a degree of freedom as to what order you can do certain things in.
Well, that would be pretty good, because considering Rockfort Island that we know it in the original, it certainly feels like a very contained location.
Yeah.
It's not very big, which obviously is reflectant of the time that it was made.
Yeah, of course.
And, it's obviously to fit in line with survival horror that we knew of the franchise.
It needed to work within that fixed camera angle game design, so it couldn't be too, open and open-ended.
Yeah.
But
I mean, one thing that we do know, like when while we're talking about Rockfort Island, is that I'm slightly jumping ahead of my notes here, but one thing that I liked in one of the interviews was that Capcom said they wanted to place a greater emphasis on the people who once lived on Rockfort Island before becoming zombies. So I wonder if the story narrative, perhaps through, unfortunately, we'll get to it eventually, but perhaps through the story of Steve, we'll understand what it meant for people who worked on Rockfort Island, what it was like, and maybe that'll add to the element of the open worldness that we'll maybe see living quarters, camps, things like that. Maybe we'll see more of that.
Yeah, I can imagine that.
Yeah,
I can see it being,
because we never we never saw much of labs really. Like they're all. It'd be good if it was all a lot more spread out, and you had like this side of the island living quarters, this side of the island military, this side of the island laboratories, this side of the island Alexia and Alfred's castle.
Yeah.
All very spread out. That would be pretty cool. Then you've obviously got one back end of the island, which is the prison.
Yeah.
So yeah, that would be pretty cool. So let's see what happens there. While we're talking about story, though, Capcom has confirmed that there will be minor narrative changes with an expanded storytelling, and in some of the expanded storytelling is that it will weave itself into the modern remakes as well as future releases, up and including Requiem. Is that all of there will be more narrative ties to future releases?
Yeah, well, something that I've seen sort of bandied around, and again, this is like nothing official, but one of the things I've seen is this rumor that the reason that we got the Veronica announcement first before any story DLC for Requiem is that the story DLC for Requiem will actually in some way tie back into the story of Veronica, and that that Veronica will actually release first. So we might get an entire full game before we get the Requiem DLC, but that's because they will be. Now, I'm not sure if I buy that.
No,
because just purely from a business sense, that's confusing to the market. Releasing another game and then releasing a full story DLC for the previous game.
It's not going to happen.
They're
just not going to do it.
Yeah.
People are still playing Requiem now, and they're getting absolutely fucking boss at it, where they're deflecting a ridiculous amount of things, and people have just got stupid at it. And there's no way that they're going to do a DLC for a previous game when everyone's jumping on the new one.
Yeah.
You know, people will still be playing Requiem because people love it, but I don't think anyone's going to go back to... Well, people will go back to play, but I think expecting a larger audience to go back and play Requiem when you've got a new title out, I don't think people are going to do that.
No, I agree.
If they do it, hats off to them, but personally, I think it'd be a mistake.
I think it's too confusing. I remember a few years back, for quite some time, there were persistent rumours that long after Village came out, that there was going to be a story expansion for Resident Evil 3 that was gonna bring back the clock tower, right? And obviously that was just pure pie in the sky, wishful thinking on the parts of certain facets of the fan base that were just continuing to be butthurt over the areas of 3 that got cut.
Yeah,
and it didn't happen, and I don't know why anyone thinks it will happen again. But I thought it was worth noting just because it is a conversation I've seen happening.
Well, yeah, because I think a lot of people, knowing what we can do now with DLC, and when people see things or experience things that they're not happy with, they always hope that the developers will put those things right, or they've purposefully omitted those things because they intend to add them after the fact. But you sort of think to yourself, well, yeah, but when you look at how the game works and runs for Resident Evil 3, inserting the clock tower segment after the fact, what's the point?
Yeah.
It's like it's over and done with now. It's... Yeah. Do I feel like major segments of... Well, we're getting onto a conversation about Resident Evil 3 now, and like we'll obviously undoubtedly cover this when we talk about Resident Evil 3. But is there an argument like that some things were cut when they probably shouldn't have been? Well, yeah, of course there is, but then you can't expect that they're going to go back and add that now, unless they purposefully left a part there to suggest that it would come eventually. But with Requiem having a DLC that references Veronica and they release that after the fact, I think that makes far more sense that they would do it before, so that when you play the DLC for Requiem, if you're a Resident Evil fan, you're going to get these Veronica references, so that when you play Veronica, those meanings and those things that are talked about, are discussed, the story revolves around, they make more sense when you play Veronica.
And that also then incentivizes players to
play Veronica.
Yeah, because then it's like there's going to be extra payoff if they've already had a sort of tease towards that next game.
Well, because if you're excited for Veronica, you've got an incentive to play Requiem, haven't you?
Yeah, exactly. I do still find it sort of interesting that they have announced Veronica before the Requiem story DLC, though. And I get it, like we said earlier on, like the Veronica existing as a remake is sort of this like worst kept secret in the industry, but it does still feel odd that they've announced like the next game before they've even finished releasing content for the current game, which has still only been out for like 5 months. But I guess
I think the people at Capcom have been very clever about this, because I get the feeling that what they're doing is they're playing that game a little bit like Feige and everyone's done with Marvel in the old days anyway.
Yeah.
That they've done a very specific timeline of everything being released and done in a very specific way, that everything makes sense in the end. And I think the reason they've probably done it is to, announcing the Veronica remake first, is so that when they do announce the DLC for Requiem, is that if it indeed does reference Veronica, people will understand why it's important to be excited for the Requiem DLC. It's because they'll be able to turn around and go, say if you're a new generation of Resident Evil players, you'll be like, oh, so this DLC is something to do with the new game that's coming out. I should probably play that. And I think that's why they've probably done it, if they have indeed done it that way. You know, and that the DLC will reference the Veronica remake. It's just simply to get people like, oh, okay, this is why I need to play the DLC then.
Yeah.
I should probably play the DLC before I play Veronica. Yes. And it's the only reason I can think of is that's why they do it first.
Yeah.
Because it's going to have a direct reference.
Yes, but I suppose that's quite a good a sort of comparison point of the MCU, because they regularly, like, the trailer for like the next movie will already be out before like the like the next one's in the cinema.
Yeah, well, this is it. I mean, they were referencing things much further down the road.
Yeah.
Before the next movie was even out, so it's like that little end sequence won't even be referenced until 2 films later.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of like what Resident Evil, the team at Resident Evil and Capcom are doing now, is that they're purposefully placing things in an order, but it only really makes sense to them. It don't really make sense to us.
Yeah, it'll make sense to us after the fact.
Yeah.
Once the content's actually released and we understand how it all fits together.
Yeah. And I think that's it.
We'll trust them. We'll trust Capcom for now.
Well, in recent years, they've not stayed as wrong as far as
No, they haven't. No, I'm happy to let them guide me.
Considering how they've been able to right the ship, because I mean, I'm playing, pardon the pun, but I'm playing Resident Evil Revelations at the minute.
Oh, yeah.
And when I see how bad a hole Resident Evil was in at that time, at the late 2000s, into 2010 or whatever, like just where it was at, it's just like, my God, it really fell short and away from what Resident Evil really should be. Like, Resident Evil Revelations I do enjoy because of it's impressive for what it can do, considering it was a 3DS game.
Yeah.
And I have a love for it because of that. It's also kind of challenging. But when you see the characters and the dialogue and the character design and everything about it is so far away from Resident Evil, but what they've been able to do to bring it back to what Resident Evil really should be for this generation, but also how it pays respect to what Resident Evil was when it was made, I'm like, you've got my complete and utter faith now. Yeah. Like you've learned that 5 to an extent anyway, 6 Revelations, dare I even say Resident Evil Revelations 2, these titles were just no good. They were just no good for the Resident Evil franchise, really. And I think the fact that they've been able to reset it and get us back to where we are, I have just got faith that whatever it is that they're doing, it's working. So just carry on.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you when I'm unhappy. And one thing we also have to discuss is, we've already kind of touched on this, is that every remake seems to learn from the previous remake. So it'll be interesting to see how much we'll carry over. But yeah, we have already sort of discussed that. I've just sort of like going through my notes now.
Yeah, they have confirmed as well that this is being made by the team that handled the 2 and 4 remakes as well, which is
promising.
A good sign.
Yeah, that's very promising. Yeah. I mean, the thing is, 3 gets the hate, but I think it's purely because it was short, and also because it felt like it streamlined it too much.
Yeah, it's a perfectly competent and enjoyable game in its own right. That just it's done a disservice by being sandwiched in between 2 of the greatest video game remakes of all time.
Yeah, and I think because it removes that element of choice which gave Nemesis its replayability. Yeah. Because that's what we said in our Resident Evil 3 series that we did, was that Resident Evil 3 Nemesis is actually a short game, but it rewards you for continuing to go back and back and back and back. And it does have multiple choices. The random generation of enemies and placements, but then when you get the remake and it is so linear and it removes all choices and options, it feels like it is even shorter of a game, because it's like, well, I've got no reason to go back. Where at least with Nemesis you did.
Yeah.
So hopefully, as you say, it's the same core remake team responsible for 2 and 4. So at least we can be pretty sure that they're gonna be very, very respectful of the source material, and they're going to expand it rather than slim it down.
Yeah.
So at least that's what we can hope for. So let's just quickly round up on some of the things that we don't know. Well, the things that we don't know, and these are all very important, we've got no information on what Steve is going to be like and what he's going to look like or anything like that. We don't know if he's going to be the same irritating piece of shit that he was before. Wesker and how large a part Wesker will play, because bearing in mind, I'd like to think that they're remaking Code Veronica X rather than Code Veronica, because as we said in our Code Veronica series, Wesker's role was expanded for the X remake. X release. To make him more the antagonist than anything else. But will they want to focus solely on Veronica and the Ashfords? So who knows? Maybe they're going to find a really good way of making sure that both get the right amount of representation. The importance of Wesker's resurfacing and the Ashfords' legacy with Veronica. So let's hope and pray that they get the balance right. We obviously don't know much of Alfred, Alexia, and Nosferatu, aka Alexander. How much screen time are they going to get? We've not seen anything on the Tyrant, the Bandersnatches, the Mercenaries, which are led by Wesker. We don't know if there's going to be any new enemies.
Do we think that they'll be more explicit about sort of, I guess, retroactively like introducing the concept of the connections earlier in the story now? Do you think that they'll...
I think that is possibly one of the most important things they need to do with adding Wesker into this story, is that one of the things that's always been very questionable about Wesker's appearance in Code Veronica is who is he working for? Because we know he walks around with HCF, but HCF is merely the name of the mercenary unit sent in to do the job. They actually work for someone else. HCF isn't the company going into Rockfort Island. That's just the military unit. So they are hired by someone, and we are now led to believe that is indeed the connections, but it's never been confirmed. So one of the things that I think should at least be addressed is Wesker's presence there is either his role within the connections or he's working for the connections. And I think that's one of the things we need to understand, because obviously he's got his own agenda. We know he's got his own agenda because of what he's doing in 4, because he wants the amber or the sample of the Plagas sample. And again, he wants that either for himself or for somebody. So is he the head of the connections? Who knows? We don't know. We just don't know. So it's just as important for us to get an understanding on that as it is for us to understand the legacy of the Ashfords and how big they are on the foundation of Umbrella and everything else. One thing that a lot of people don't seem to be talking about is because everyone's so excited to see the return of Claire, but we obviously get the return of Chris.
We do.
We have not had Chris in the remake universe yet.
No, we haven't. I mean, we've had him in the sort of RE Engine era in a limited capacity in Biohazard and Village. But we've not had sort of in his prime young Chris.
And we can never seem to settle on what Chris looks like, because how Chris looks in Village, so how he looks in Biohazard, they're quite different.
And I know that sort of. I think like Capcom have sort of confirmed that they used the same reference model, the same person for both versions, but I think his appearance at the end of 7 was so, people like reacted so poorly to it that they were like, okay, we need to like tweak this. So I think technically it's the same, structurally it's the same person, it's the same face model that they've used for Chris, but they just sort of beefed him up a bit, gave him a beard, maybe like
his appearance
made his nose a bit less prominent because he's got a right big fucking honking nose at the end of 7, hasn't he?
Yeah, and I think 8, so that's Village, he does look a little more like a modern, graphically, but like more of that modern era Chris Redfield from 5.
Yeah.
He has more of a look of 5. So it'll be interesting to see what a young version of that model, if that's what we're going to get, is going to look like. Is he going to be massive? Are they going to slim him down from like more like he was within the original Resident Evil?
Yeah.
Or is he going to be absolutely massive again?
Yeah. I'd imagine it'll be a sort of, it'll be toned down in terms of like beef. I think he'll still be like, I mean, he's still meant to be a pretty, muscular dude, but I think he'll be less jacked than he is in 5, and
he ain't got he ain't got round to ripping it up and ripping it down.
No, he's not started punching rocks yet.
Yeah, and bench pressing houses, things like that. So we've also got no information on voice cast yet.
No, I mean,
I think it's safe to say we'll probably get the original Claire back. From 2.
From the 2 remake, yeah. I mean, it's obviously the same sort of model.
Yeah,
visually, they've aged her up slightly, but it's obviously it's the same model of Claire that we saw in RE2 remake. So you'd assume it'll be the same voice actress. I would assume Chris will probably be the same actor as Village.
I hope so. It'd be nice to get some sort of continuity going with voice actors and models.
We'll assume it'll be the same Wesker that we had in 4 and that was Xeno in Requiem.
Yeah, I think that new what's his name, Craig, I can't remember his surname.
Awful with names, so apologies to anyone I might offend by that.
Yeah, well, I'm pretty sure they use a good chunk of his facial features as well. When you see the guy and the way he talks and everything, it's undoubtedly him. Yeah. So I really do think they'll get him back. He's become like the voice of Wesker, and I think his voice for this remake generation and remake series just fits better than when I played Resident Evil 5 recently with Charlotte for my channel and everything. His voice is iconic in 5. Some of the lines are iconic, but
total global saturation.
Yeah, there's so many lines which are just absolutely like awesome. I mean, the 7 minutes for a start is everyone knows the 7 minutes line. 7 minutes. 7 minutes is all I can spare to play with you. And there's so many great lines, but it really sort of fit that era. Like when you play it, you really are like, oh, this is so evocative of its time.
Yeah.
These really overly theatrical villains. And DC Douglas, he's sort of like evolved Richard War's voice into this over-the-top version of Wesker. But when you play this remake era now, and it feels a lot more grounded, it's a lot darker, it's a lot grittier, isn't it? And I think the new voice and presentation we've got of Wesker, what we've seen, I think this version really fits, and I like it. At first, I wasn't sure because it was so different, but then I was like, yeah, but it's more serious, and it's more just tonally it works better. So I think it's safe to say he will be back.
I would imagine so. Hopefully, assuming that we still get Mr. Burnside. I mean, no disrespect to his original voice actor, but we can't have whiny teen Steve again.
We can't have that. No, we can't. And you're right. We do need a new version of Chris. Of Steve, don't we?
Yeah.
It's too much. It needs to be a lot more. It needs to be more grounded. That voice actor sort of, again, it worked of its time. Gaming voice acting was still evolving to a point where it was, taken a lot more serious.
Yeah.
And when you listen to the voice actor for it, you can probably hear his voice or a voice a lot like it in a lot of other games of that era, of that PS2 Dreamcast era. But if you heard that now in a game, you'd instantly just be like, what the fuck am I listening to?
Who is this? Yeah.
If we at the level of voice acting now has become so cinematic, hasn't it? That if you heard it now, you'd just be like, I'm not even playing anymore. I'm just turning it off. It was driving me mad because I couldn't remember the voice actor's surname because it's not difficult to say, but it's not like it's Jones or anything. But his name is Craig Bernatowski.
Right.
So I knew it was something like that. But yeah, he used the voice of Wesker and Senna in the Resident Evil franchise as it is right now. One voice that we do know, at least, I'm pretty sure, certainly sounded like it anyway, set to return is Hunk.
Yes.
Because that sounded exactly like Hunk in Requiem.
Yeah, the commander.
And, the commander. Maybe Hunk is too much of a stretch in the new Resident Evil games. And in Resident Evil 2. So, we obviously don't know an exact release date apart from 2027. But, yeah. So, I think, really, in terms of everything that we do know, which obviously isn't very much, I think we've covered a great deal in what we think we'll get. But I think that is pretty much it. So, what we've seen so far suggests Capcom understands exactly how important Veronica is to the wider Resident Evil story. The interviews don't suggest they're trying to reinvent the game. They're sort of trying to modernise it while respecting what fans loved so much about the original. But as for more information, I suppose we'll be back with another field report as and when we get it.
Yeah.
But that is pretty much it for what we know thus far.
Yeah. Like I said before, I think, it's possible we might get something at Gamescom. If I were a betting man, I'd say if Resident Evil shows up at Gamescom, it'll be the Requiem DLC. And I think we'll hear more about Veronica. We'll maybe get the first gameplay at TGA's in December.
Yeah.
That'd be my guess if I was a betting man.
Yeah. I think it's safe to say we're going to have something else by the end of the year.
Yeah.
That still within the 30th anniversary, they're going to make sure that they give us as much as they possibly can while people are still riding that hype train.
If they were really smart, if they really wanted to treat us, they might attach some sort of new trailer, even if it was only another cinematic trailer, but a new trailer to the Zack Cregger movie in September.
It would be awesome to go to cinema and get a new trailer attached to that. That would be cool as fuck.
It would.
We'll do a field report on that anyway, won't we?
We definitely will. Only 2 months away now.
God, I can't believe it's coming around that quick.
2 in a bit. Yeah.
That's really coming round. We'll do a field report on that just before its release, I think.
Yeah.
And then we'll maybe do another one after it's released to see what people thought to it, get a conversation going.
And see what we thought to it.
Well, yeah, and either you can sit there defending it and I'll slag it off, or vice versa, or we'll both hate it, or we'll both love it, won't we?
Hopefully, the latter.
Yeah, I'd like to think
Fingers
so.
crossed.
I'd like to think so. We can but hope. So we'll see what happens there. I'm really looking forward to your episode on the original Resident Evil.
Yeah, me too.
I really want to know what you've got to unveil on it. Nothing good, I hope.
No.
Well, not that I hope. I should expect is probably what I was trying to say. So yeah, in terms of you guys listening, let us know your thoughts about the Veronica remake. Are you excited for it? What do you expect to see? Do you agree with anything that we've said? Do you think you were wrong about everything that we've said and it's going to be something else instead? If it is, tell us in the comments. You can do that on both Spotify and YouTube. You can leave us comments there. And if you've not played Code Veronica before, you can go check out my playthrough on my channel on YouTube. And yeah, we'd love to hear from you. Just drop us comments either on Instagram, on Facebook as well. We've got our Facebook group now. It's a good place to join on conversations there. But yeah, I think that's probably it for our field report today.
I think so, yeah.
We've covered a lot. We've covered a lot, considering there's not much to go on.
Yeah, and we'll be continuing the Code Veronica love soon with the next mainline episode.
Yes, so we are back with another session with the next one, rounding off our trip on Rockfort Island, as we said in our last series, where we'll be talking about Resident Evil Survivor 2. So this will be our last trip around Code Veronica. So yeah, and then we'll be moving on to Season 2 of Typewriter Sessions, where we'll basically just be getting straight back into it.
We will. Right.
Is that everything, James?
That's everything.
Okay, well, in that case, thank you very much, everybody. Don't forget to go jump on our social media, Facebook and Instagram. I've got my YouTube channel as well. And if you can please just give this a thumbs up and a like and a rating, or even leave a review if you want to. All these things really, really do help people find the podcast. So if you're a fan of it and you think other people will be, that's the best possible way, aside from sharing it, of course. But all these things really do help the podcast grow and help other people find it. And hopefully they'll enjoy it as much as you have. So, but in the meantime, we're going to leave it there. So it's goodbye from James.
Goodbye.
And goodbye from me. Keep those ink ribbons stocked up, everybody, and we'll be catching you in the next session real soon. See you later, everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye.